this committee, so I will pass it over to her and let her take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Chair, I appreciate that. Yes, I was asked to carry this resolution mostly from members within the District 6. St. Adalbert's Parish, Our Lady of Hungary, the Notre Dame students for the Indiana Driving Card Project, as well as about 11,000 undocumented immigrants that live mostly in the 6th District, but most certainly throughout our entire community. So I thank you for allowing this to be in the committee. And I want to thank all the co-sponsors thus far. When I reached out with this resolution, it was overwhelming support for this. This resolution is simply this. It's to really support basic quality of life issues for people that live here in our community. Quality of life issues such as taking your child to the doctor, going to the grocery store, perhaps better employment opportunities. When you don't have a driver's license, you really take for granted some of those simple things that you do in your life. And there's no family that should not be able to give child care to their children, taking them to a babysitter. What about to the soccer games, football games? All of these things are barriers for people to live a better life in our community. Other than that, there's also traffic safety concerns with this resolution. It talks about the state legislature and how this bill, that will be the 5th year that it gets introduced downstate, will help with training. They'll have to go through and read the signs. And the card cannot be used for voting. It can't be used as a form of identification. The economic benefits, it will increase value in the community by people being able to obtain better jobs, growing Indiana's economy, as it states on here, between $17 million and $23 million annually. It'll also add about $17 million to state revenues over 3 years. Insurance, this would have a boom in the insurance industry of about $68 million over 3 years. So undocumented immigrants right now can buy a vehicle, they can't register a vehicle, and they can't drive the vehicle. So this would also be an economic benefit to the state and to the insurance industry. Now we look at our law enforcement. This will reduce time that officers spend ticketing and impounding vehicles. So if someone has the proper registration, the proper insurance, regardless of whose fault it is, they will stop, get the information, and focus, let our police officers focus on things that are real threats in our community. So I think that it will reduce the number of hit and runs that you have and the number of hit and run fatalities, not only in our community, but throughout the whole state. So I realize this comes to this council looking at it as a state measure, as a state bill that will be introduced next year, but it really has a lot of local impacts for people in our community. And when we're talking about 11,000 people locally in the state of Indiana, we're talking more of the upwards of 100,000 undocumented immigrants in the state of Indiana. And that's a large number of people. So this gives them opportunity in the ways that I've just mentioned. And like I said earlier, I appreciate everybody's support on this. And I see Jesusa Rivera that is sitting here in attendance with us. What a huge advocate that she is for our Latino and Hispanic community and for our immigrant farm workers. Her work in the community is tireless. And I want to thank you, Jesusa, for approaching me on this subject and bringing this to the forefront of our community. So that's really what I have for our presentation. I will have more at the regular meeting. That's all I have for now, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any committee members that have questions for the presenter?
Councilwoman Nitzgotsky, do you know how many states have already passed this type of legislation?
Yes, I believe it's 16.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No questions.
Is there anybody from the public that has any questions or any statements in favor or against this resolution? Hearing none, and I don't see any online, I will bring it back to the committee for any comments. Is there anybody that would like to? Please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Councilwoman Nitzgotsky for bringing this resolution to our attention and consideration. I am also grateful to be a co-sponsor on this resolution. Thank you. Want to thank the Notre Dame students who did the tremendous research behind this resolution and the work that they did. This makes complete economic sense and safety sense, and as well allows our undocumented residents opportunities to better their livelihoods and their families and our community at large. Thank you.
Anybody else that would like committee or otherwise?
Sure. Really quick, you stated a number, Nitzgotsky, Sheila, council member Nitzgotsky, you stated a number of 11,000. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because we are still supposed to be redrawing our lines for a census. How does that number itself impact the entire over in your area? Okay, so we get into like a real sticky conversation. I think that this needs to happen. I am totally on board. I am a co-sponsor, right? Or
You are.
signed
Thank
on,
you.
okay? So let me say that first. But I think it begs another discussion point when you're talking about census and population as well, and how would that properly be managed? Or how do we look at that number and make it a part of your district? Like you said, 11,000, so obviously somebody's been doing some counting. Or we don't include that in the conversation as it relates to resources. That's where I'm going with this. You have resources to talk about, and you're talking about different census tracts that get more resources because of the disparities within that census tract. So I'm not asking you to answer that, I'm just putting that out there, because I think there's something else that is going to happen and has happened because of the influx of new residents into this area. It's just a point that I wanted to make mention of while we were talking about it.
Okay, thank you. Chair, may I comment?
Please.
Thank you. And I would like to thank you, Councilman Davis, for being a co-sponsor on this very important resolution. That 11,000 mostly are within the 6th district, but that's also throughout the South Bend area as well. So I don't want to put any misinformation out there in numbers, but within our greater community, it is around 11,000. And as far as resources, this will help people in so many ways with just having the ability to drive for medical use, their children, groceries, or trying to make it to those appointments to gain their citizenship. Being limited by not being able to obtain a driver's record, driver's card, driver's license, is just so limiting. And these residents have been in our community for years, and they're bringing their families up. And so I thank you so much for your comments. I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate your support. At this time, I would like to make a motion that we send this to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
I second.
Clerk Jones, can we have a roll call?
Yes. Committee Chair Wax,
Aye.
Committee Member McBride. Aye. Committee Member Nitzgotsky,
Aye.
Committee Member Thomas Morgan.
Aye.
4 ayes.
Okay, the motion has passed. It will be sent to the full committee with a favorable recommendation. I believe that exhausts our agenda, so we will adjourn the Health and Public Safety Committee meeting.
We have 3 minutes before Community Relations will convene.
I haven't. I will look at my email. Today is his birthday. Have anybody heard from Troy?
It did not download, whatever that was.
All right, let's see. Okay, yeah, it looks like it's not working with us. That's fine. So what I'll do is I will present from my computer.
Can you just click as I click? Kind of watch it as I go, or is that,
Yeah, I can watch if you click,
Okay.
I can watch while you're clicking and I'll click.
Okay.
I go to the next slide. Okay?
that's perfect.
Okay.
And then, how do I get this up there?
So, so this won't be able to transmit anything since we're not on Teams. So what'll happen is that the presentation I have. So I'll
Oh,
present-
okay.
I'll
Can
present-
I click it through from your computer if we put this mouse in your computer? Let's do it.
And within each census tract, some have more. So if we are measuring or have measured that number, one, there's many items. Two, because we have that service population. Perfect. Federal funds that we gave list stages. Then if we have those two data, then how are we going to?
Not everybody. Volunteers and division, you end up taking on things that trust it.
Right.
In fact, those numbers are probably higher just because they
For sure, absolutely.
But technically, it would. So, in practice, I can't.
So, what I was getting at was about the priority. One of the things that like thereof, priority is the like. That's
All the meeting of the Community Relations Committee to order. Clerk Jones, could you please take the roll call?
Yes. Committee Chair Hammond,
Present.
Committee Member Warner, Committee Member Wax,
Present.
Committee Vice Chair Davis,
present.
Citizen Member Laquita Hughes, Citizen Member Drew Duncan. We have 3 present.
Thank you, Clerk Jones. This request to present this information before the council initially was sent to Clerk Jones, and she forwarded that to me. I have been intrigued with what I have been able to find information-wise about this organization, and I'm very much looking forward to the presentation. So I would like to introduce Eve Finnessey to the council, and you may give us your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am
Could you,
Eve
I'm sorry, could you also give us your address?
Yes. I live at should I give the Forever Learning address?
Either one.
I don't-
Okay, 'cause I am here as the executive director of Forever Learning. We are at 54191 Ironwood Road, South Bend 46635. I'd also like to point out that 3 of my board members are with us also this evening. I have John Pendarvis, Paul Stevenson, and Jim Capsa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, actually, for just listening to me this evening. Forever Learning is close to our hearts, and I really appreciate the time and attention that you are willing to spend on us. Forever Learning was founded 47 years ago by a priest named Father Louis Putz. He was an immigrant from Germany. He came as a child by himself between the 2 world wars. His mother had pinned a note to his chest that said, "Delivered to Notre Dame, Indiana." He hit Ellis Island. They put him on a train, and he was delivered. And he stayed at Notre Dame for his entire life. He became a teacher, and quite a character as far as what I have learned. He had three major mottos that he lived by. He felt that life was a chain with three links, that we have the time in our life of learning, our time, the middle link of earning, and the end of our life, which he felt was a time of returning, which was where he was when it was time for him to retire. And he felt that he had a lot more to offer. By returning, what he really meant was a life of service, that at the time, post-retirement, you have time to really give back to your community, and that's what he was looking to do. He also felt very strongly about our senior adult population. He felt that isolation was probably the worst thing, the greatest malady, as he put it, that could happen to senior adults. So he founded the Forever Learning Institute. Forever Learning is, at its heart, a school. It's a school built on the concept of service. Everyone at Forever Learning is a volunteer, except for myself and one part-time staff member. So I want you to keep that in mind as I talk a little bit about the scope of what Forever Learning has done for the South Bend community. Our mission is to improve the quality and dignity of senior adult life through continuing intellectual challenge, spiritual reflection, and social interaction. Forever Learning has remained true to that mission today. We are a standalone, not-for-profit. We are run completely by a board of directors. Our faculty, typically counting 120 per semester, are all volunteer. We are structured like you would any school. We have 2 semesters each year, a spring and a fall. We just completed our fall semester. Each of our semesters is 10-week in length. Students are required to be 50 years. Predominantly, our median age is 74. Predominantly, our students are all retired, so therefore they tend to be over 65. We have a number of students well into their 90s and 2 teachers that are going to turn 90 this year. Here's Forever by the numbers. This is a typical semester. This was my pre-COVID numbers, so I do want to point that out. The semester that we just concluded saw 800 students. The semester that we closed down, we were about 2 weeks into it when we needed to close down, and that was our largest semester ever. Forever Learning is, quite frankly, exploding. It is a great place. It's a huge need. In order to address that need, we have, our main location, we rent space in St. Therese Little Flower Catholic Church on Ironwood. We also are using the Howard Park Event Center space. We have a partnership with the Jewish Federation as well as Southfield Village, and they welcome our courses there. Little Flower is a great parish. It has worked really well for us, has a full gymnasium, a full kitchen, 6 classrooms. Our lease takes us just daytime only. It is shared space. Our academic programming is basically whatever a teacher wants to teach. So again, we are all volunteers. Teachers come to me and pitch a class, if you will, of almost any topic you can imagine has been taught at Forever Learning. Various subject matters, areas come in, and I'm going to zip through these because I'm cautious of my time. But arts and creative crafts, we teach cooking, baking. We've done a lot with business and technology. It is an area extremely important to a senior adult. A lot of our seniors are unable to use computers to communicate with any amount of comfort. So that's an ongoing struggle for us. Health and fitness is a huge part of our program. Not only does it keep us moving, but it's also part of basically socializing. And socializing is a huge part of our mission. History is beloved by almost every student at Forever Learning. Those classes fill probably with the first day of registration. Literature is every kind of literature. We taught Middlemarch this past year. We taught, do a lot of Faulkner, a lot of American literature. By languages, we are teaching Polish, German, Hebrew, Spanish, French, and we have taught Russian. So again, If a teacher comes to me and says, I need to revisit my Polish and I'd like to teach a class, we're on and we do it. We partner with a lot of local organizations just to keep, again, the depth and breadth of our programming for everybody, basically. Lately, we have recently been working really closely with the student group at Notre Dame. They're called CS for Good. It's a campus club, CS meaning computer science, and they're assisting us in our technology classes. We discovered during the COVID pandemic that need was just almost overwhelming. But also Music Village has provided us with music instruction. And as you can see through the list, just a lot of different organizations through the years. We are funded completely, almost completely, by our tuition dollars. So it's $55 to take a class at Forever Learning regardless of the length of the course. We hold 2 major fundraisers per year. And we also have been blessed with really awesome corporate donations as well as private donors. Our students themselves donate a lot of money to Forever Learning. So one of the biggest reasons I'm here this evening and to request a moment of your time is because Forever Learning is facing some challenges. The biggest challenge we have is overcrowding. Our classrooms at Little Flower, some of them, they were built in the 70s for children. And we have a couple classrooms that a full room would be 8 adults. So I have waiting lists, I have disappointed people every semester, and it's growing substantially. I simply don't have the physical space in our classrooms to fit the number of students that want to take our courses. I also obviously have been going out and about in the community, like Howard Park, to put courses there. I can continue to do that, but it creates some problems with administering the program, and it's also more difficult for the socialization. One of the things about Forever Learning is that we're all there together, teaching each other, learning from each other. The other issue is that if you don't drive, you really cannot take a Forever Learning class. Transportation is key. We are not on a bus route, and it is I can't get them to come to our door either. It's not financially doable for the bus system. So what our program is really desperately in need of right now is this list. Larger classrooms, potentially a lecture hall. We need wide enough hallways that a wheelchair can pass another wheelchair or a walker. We need rooms that an adult student can move around and sit down in an adult-sized chair. Audiovisual would be an enormous blessing. Again, this facility was built in the 70s. We love the kitchen. We love outdoor space. We would desperately love an art room. Because we share the space with evening groups and weekend groups, I can't leave anything up. So we will have a closet, but I don't have a technology lab, even if I had all of the computers, because other people are using the space. Same thing with an art project. It can't remain in the room. So as we started to create a list of everything our program needs, we realized that what we really need is a senior center. What we would love to do is to be a part of a larger senior center working with our community partners. We already partner with Real Services. They teach courses at Forever Learning. We'd love to have a hot lunch program, but our facility can't handle it. Real Services would love to host a hot lunch program in alliance with Forever Learning. We use the park properties, and we would love to see that relationship grow. Senior centers really bring all of the seniors in the community together in one big group. Our seniors would have access to their Social Security. And I just, one story I had during COVID lockdown. Social Security employees went home and worked from home. To get to Social Security, you had to use your computer. If you couldn't use a computer, you had to call. The call line was a 3-hour wait, and then you would get hung up upon and have to do it again. I had people whose spouses died, and they couldn't tell Social Security that their spouse had died. They couldn't get their benefits. They were desperate. That's just one story that walked into my office. It is huge. The need is huge. Senior centers are an enormous part of almost every community in the state. There are over 70 senior centers in the state of Indiana. According to the National Council on Aging, senior centers are really the community focal point for all seniors. It's a gateway to all of the other services that I mentioned. We could have a SHIP office, we could, on and on. There are just a slew of services that would benefit, as well as every senior that lives in South Bend would benefit from a senior center. Why do I feel so strongly about this? Senior Center, like I said, provides both physically and a space. It is basically a space where everyone else is your age. You share the same difficulties. So as people age, regardless of who they were during their working years, where they live in the community, there's a lot in common when you get older. And it makes navigating today's world extremely difficult. I mentioned technology physically. I mean, even if you can drive a car, you still have to get your walker out of the back seat, walk all the way up to wherever the place is you're going. You can't go to the mall. You can't get your Apple computer fixed. It's too far to walk. It's just those little things that seniors in our community face every day. The other thing I want to mention to you is that this is an asset. Seniors are moving to South Bend. There's a reason my program is exploding. It's exploding because we are, as a generation, getting older. The boomer generation is aging. People are retiring to South Bend. It has affordable housing. It has community resources, a great park system. It has a university that'll let you go to a basketball game and be a part of just for the sheer joy of it. That brings a lot of culture to this community. So it's an attractive place to retire. We have people that are moving to South Bend for that purpose. We have seen in our community that more and more housing and developments are going that are building to attract seniors to live in this community. The other piece that seniors provide is a massive amount of volunteer help. Next time you're at St. Margaret's House, next time you go to a show and check out who's working there, they're all retired people. They're all retired people living a full life, a purposeful life through volunteerism. They're the reason that these organizations exist. Go to the hospital and see who's volunteering there. They're retired folk. Seniors are a vital community asset. And I am here this evening to ask you to consider the senior population in your planning, that if Forever Learning could be a part of that, given the needs that we have for space, I would love it. But I am hopeful that you don't this particular asset, this asset of senior people moving to South Bend. There's more shots. I love our pictures, so I have to show those a lot. I tried to make that as brief and quick as possible. Do you have any questions for me this evening?
Let's go to the committee. Anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Councilman Davis.
Well, it will be a question. In your efforts of going out and obviously seeking out help, you've obviously been educated on what seniors bring to the table as it relates to the life of the community. Over the past, maybe about 10 years, we have always tried to coin our city as a cool city, so that kind of like moved away that demographic and say, hey, young people, come in, let's party, you know. And so that was the idea, I think, that was being given off, which wasn't a bad idea either, right? But I think that we need to really start talking about how inclusive this city is for all people and how we are working towards a goal to make sure every demographic has a benefit because they live here. I think that was missed when we became the cool city because the number of people that are in my district, the district that I represent, they were seniors. Your seniors are your voters, right? They really are.
Oh, well, I was going to mention that, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the fact of how this works out. And so they are also the legacy of this place that we call South Bend. And so I just think that when we begin to talk about South Bend, we don't have to always talk about how cool it is, how our nightlife is really, you know, Robinson Apartments, Second District. A lot of phone calls about the partying. And so what I'm getting at is that I think that our conversation moving forward, hooray, I love it. I think that we need to really start talking about more about our seniors and our senior population. I really do.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'd also like to point out that a senior center helps the people that are senior today, but it helps all of us.
Absolutely.
We all hope to be there, so.
Any other questions from committee? I would just like to mention that when we were doing our community meetings around the budget, senior center did come up. I personally have had a conversation with the mayor regarding a senior center as well with our community investment director. So I know that it has been broached, and we will continue to have those conversations. This is good information, I think, for us to be able to enhance that conversation as we move forward.
I am very heartened to hear that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anything else? Pardon? Yes, the rest of the council, please. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Ms. Fennessy, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I have in-laws who have benefited greatly from the programming at the Forever Learning Institute, and so thank you for that. I know it's been very meaningful for them in their life. So in conversation with many such organizations, some of the first things that come up is, I need a new building, and I need a new center. That's certainly a solution, and you have already explored other creative solutions, as you mentioned, partnerships in other locations. And I share that just as a, by way of a suggestion for us to think creatively as a community, that it's not always about necessarily building new. We know new construction is expensive, but, or new facility. They're wonderful buildings that are vacated and empty in our city that, we would love to redevelop and reuse in new creative ways. But in thinking about, our seniors are all over the community in all districts. And so, as you move forward in your planning and feasibility studies and assessments in such center, I think the debate becomes, a centralized location or locations across the city that best maximize and utilize the spaces that we already have. So venues, parks and arts, we have community centers across districts, our new library, other existing educational institutions and parish centers. Our places, our neighborhoods where seniors already live. And so I just wonder, in terms of, as you continue to plan it and study this, that is something I'm sure you'd be looking at.
Absolutely. It is something that we've looked at strongly. We've toured actually a number of the South Bend Community School properties as well. For Forever Learning's usage, having a classroom is really, we've discovered, is quite key. Having the AV, having a place for people to sit. So the room itself does need to be a typical classroom setting. That being said, the other thing that I would like to point out is one of the things that a senior center does really is bring it all under one roof. And what is good about that is that it really is a place that you hang out as a senior with like-minded. It's not fast-paced, it's a slower pace. The facilities aren't geared towards children zipping down the hall, which is great and it's fun, but it's not for seniors. And just the physicality of a senior center is a little bit different focused than a community center or a park. And our park systems are gorgeous, but we are lacking, a true senior focus in any one facility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last comments? Councilman Lee?
Thank you for your presentation and the wonderful work that you guys are doing to engage our seniors and making them continue to forever learn and continue to grow. It's very important that we have these opportunities for our seniors, and I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And can that be made available to council members so we can reference that? That'd be wonderful. We really thank you for your time and for bringing this information to the council. All of you, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will adjourn.
Chair,
Yes,
I got two questions.
have it.
The first one has everything to do with the members who are committee members who are from the public in their absence. They've been absent for a number of meetings that we've had. Obviously, this year is over with, but as we move forward, is there any criteria as it relates to people who hold positions as citizen members that they show up to maybe the majority of the meetings, 50% of the meetings, 10%? I don't know what that number is, but I'm shining a light on something. If they're here to vote and supposed to participate, they should
Right.
obviously be here to participate and vote.
According to our parliamentarian, there is no current requirement.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. I think we need to develop a criteria because I think that really puts a stretch on the committee. The committee structure has its own framework, and the framework is supposed to work together so that we have the benefit of multiple voices at the table voting. It has nothing to do with relationships. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. It's a framework. It's an organization, and we have to run it to its highest level if we can. So, Bob, please, we need help with that one. The second thing that I wanted to get at, was there an ask coming from the organization that was just here presenting? And I'm talking just council right now, committee.
Just that we are heading into a strategic planning
Okay, see, I didn't know that.
season, and for that to be part of our conversation.
Okay, all right.
That was my understanding.
Right, sure. So I just,
I missed that, so I'm glad you asked, because I just thought it was an update, so.
Yeah.
That is an important piece to,
I want to make sure that there's action, right? That we're headed towards a goal and a finality with presentations like that. We're talking about members of our community, so.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I would like to adjourn the Community Relations Committee and call to order zoning and annexation. Clerk Jones, could you please take the roll?
Excuse me, yes. Committee Chair Hammond,
Present.
Committee Vice Chair Niskowski,
Present.
Committee Member Davis,
Henry's here.
Committee Member Lee,
Present.
Citizen Member Tyler Rouse. Okay, we have 4 present.
Thank you. This evening, before the committee, we have Bill number 129-21. Do we have a presenter from the city?
Thank you, Council. Joseph Molnar, zoning specialist with offices on the 14th floor of the County City Building. Today before you is a rezoning at 602 Dayton Street in the southeast side of the city of South Bend. This property is located just immediately north of the Riley High School parking lot and athletic fields. A little bit of background, the site was initially constructed about a century ago as a single-family house. At least 3 to 4 decades ago, it was converted to multifamily. We're not quite sure when that did occur. We don't know if that was done illegally or not. We just know it did occur, and we don't have too much information on if it was done with proper permitting or not. A new owner is looking to acquire the building, and instead of going through the grandfathering process, which takes a lot of time and research on behalf of staff and of the petitioner, they just wanted to rezone the property to U2 to allow for the site to currently remain as a 4-unit. That's a little bit of background on it. This is the zoning for the surrounding area. As you see, most of Dayton Street is all U1, Urban Neighborhood 1, but there is some U2 small-scale multifamily scattered through the southeast neighborhood. This is the site as it currently sits today. Again, it was a fairly large single-family house that was converted a couple of decades ago. Here's another view of it. It was the opinion of staff that rezoning the site to U2 Urban Neighborhood 2 will allow for the structure to continue to be used as a multi-unit dwelling, which will provide sustained housing options while not drastically changing the established character of the neighborhood. As the site has currently been used in this use for at least a couple of decades now, we're fairly confident it shouldn't have too many negative impacts. But we did, when we sent the recommendation favorably to the Plan Commission, we did make it subject to acquiring a certificate of rental safety from code enforcement, just to make sure that the house is currently up to all standards that we expect housing to be in the city. So like I said, we did send it to the Plan Commission favorably with that subject to, and the Plan Commission sends it to you as well with a favorable recommendation, subject to acquiring that certificate of rental safety from code enforcement. I do believe the petitioner is on the line as well, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. We would like to hear from the petitioner, if you have anything you'd like to add.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you state
Okay,
your
great.
name
Sorry
and
about that.
address, please?
Sure, David Leffel, 25790 Stanton Road in North Liberty, Indiana.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add to the presentation?
I don't have anything to add. I think Joseph did a great job summarizing the situation for us.
Okay, thank you. Can you identify the secondary building on the property? Mr. Molnar?
I don't, do you mean the building right here to the east, or?
Is that what I'm seeing? I don't know, there's, from the
I
rendering
think that,
we.
I think that might just be a parking pad in the back. Towards the south, they do have a parking pad.
A parking pad?
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
it's actually a structure. I think it's
Okay.
just a concrete
Okay.
slab.
All right, so we will go to the committee. Any committee members have questions?
Not committee. I'm not on the committee.
Okay. Councilman Lee?
So this property was originally single-family. Somehow somebody did some adjustments and added and made it multifamily, and nobody knows when or how or...
And as I'm sure most of you know, this happens throughout the city. People start doing things and they don't pull building permits and no one catches it. A lot of times now, the building department will catch it if they see AEP will sometimes come to them because these are separately metered. And so now AEP usually sometimes reach out to the building department to see if the zoning's okay. But this probably happened at least back into the 50s or 60s. So we had information at least standing at least a couple decades that it's been multifamily. The new owner who's acquiring it wants to make sure that everything's done legally going forward, which we appreciate. So that's why we're coming here today.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and other council? Councilman Wax?
If this came prospectively, if it was single-family today, are you as confident that there would be a favorable recommendation to be zoned as multifamily?
I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, it would be a slightly different case if it was currently single-family. We're typically not in the business of encouraging houses being converted from single-family, multifamily. We're basically looking at this as a multifamily structure already because it's already been converted. It would maybe be looked at differently. From a zoning perspective, U2 isn't if this lot was vacant and someone proposed to build a 3-unit on a vacant lot here, I don't think the staff would have any issues having a favorable recommendation to U2. It's right next to the school, so it's already near other U2 rezonings. So if the lot was vacant, I don't think we would have issues with a favorable rezoning to U2. It's not, it's capped at 4 units, so the U2 district doesn't allow more than 4, so you're still, the U2 was designed to be kind of seamlessly involved in a single-family neighborhood. So we have put protections in place for that. If it was done in a really, if someone brought a really good project forward saying this is how I'll convert the building and it was done in a tasteful way, we might view it favorably as well.
So the reason why I ask, and I'm generally a property rights advocate,
Sure.
and, you know, the more people could use their property as they wish, I'm generally in favor of that, but I'm just curious your thoughts on, I know this was done probably a while ago, but in effect, isn't it encouraging, or couldn't an argument be made that it's encouraging people to just make the changes, whether legal or not, fly under the radar long enough, and they'll just let it go because it's there already and it's not impacting the neighborhood?
Sure, I think if it was something that someone had done like within the last couple of years where we could find verifiable proof of it, we might have a different light toward it. And also, this is a new property owner coming in. Again, it just happened, so it might have been legal when it happened. I mean, we have no documentation of when it was, so at some point in time, it was legal to do these, so it could actually be grandfathered in, it just would take a lot of research to do that.
Well, if that's a possibility, I guess that's a little more palatable then. Thank you.
Councilwoman McBride.
Thank you. If I can get a little more context with me living directly in an area on the southeast side. In 1998, I bought my home, and it was a 4 multi-unit property, and under the John Hunt's administration, who was doing the whole revitalization on the southeast side with home ownership, converted a lot of those homes from multifamily to single family, and mine was the first one in that conversion. And I think the only thing that happened, I recall after the city, I was paying, the water meter was reading 4 units, and it was just 1 unit. So they had to go back a couple years and credit my payments for several years back. But that did happen at least 20 years ago on that immediate side of town. So that could have been, I don't know, factual, but that definitely happened in that area when I moved in 98.
Yes. Mr. Molnar, thank you. I want to pick up a bit on Councilman Wax's question or concern that you raised. So I live in such a neighborhood where, as Councilwoman McBride says, large multifamily homes have been converted to single-family homes, mine being one of them. And so I want to ask this as a question, but raise as a concern. I'm concerned about a precedent that we might set, in that someone who, in this day and age, wants to go ahead and begin construction on a home and make it into a multifamily home without permission, and then after the fact seeks rezoning. What guarantees do we have that in approving this, we don't set such a precedent?
Sure, so zoning is always, zoning is essentially always by a parcel basis. I mean, every different property has its own history to it. Like I said, this goes back, we believe, decades. It's been this way. So obviously, if that wasn't the case, if this was someone, done this within the last 2 to 5, 6 years, we might be having a different discussion, just because if it was done illegally, there might be, more issues with it. I think also we just have to also fall back on the fact that our building department usually catches these. We've gotten reports where people are trying to install new meters, without permission, and those have been stopped. It's a big city. There's a lot you can do, especially if everything's happening inside the house. But every rezoning is looked at individually. Like I answered Councilmember Wax, if this was a vacant lot, we would have no problem being in favor of a U2 rezoning here. This is why that U2 rezoning was created, where it caps that limit at 4, so that you can still have that small scale, neighborhood feel where you're not worried that it's going to take what we saw in, your neighborhood on the near west side, as some of these houses were divided into 20, apartments and more, where you're really getting out of scale with the neighborhood. As for precedents, though, again, because of the long duration of the house, I think that kind of is a different story. We also, like I said, we recommend that if you do approve it, you do it subject to the verification, like I said, just that we make sure that the house is legally up standard and safe living for the residents.
Thank you. I still, I think it's important to raise these concerns about
Oh,
precedents.
certainly, and it was concerns we had as well, but we have to look at the situation as a new owner is coming in, they want to, for one, update the property and make it legal, and that's kind of how we have to look at it going forward.
Absolutely. I appreciate the owner wanting to make sure moving forward it's legal and doing the right thing.
Councilman Davis?
Yes. Quick question. So how is that alerted? So how would the city or the building department know that somebody's outside fixing a brand-new home and not getting a permit for it or proper zoning? How will we know that?
Sure. So there's multiple different ways that we get alerted of construction without permitting. For one, the building department's inspectors who are out in the field, if they see, usually it's a large dumpster, especially if you're doing a complete renovation of a building, there's usually a large demo or a large dumpster in the driveway or right in the street. If they see that, they usually look if permits were pulled on the property. Right now, if you went in and say you wanted to convert a house from a single family to a 5-unit house.
I'm talking about a person who decides not to include the building department or abide by the local ordinances.
Sure, so if an inspector saw activity happening and there wasn't a permit pulled on the property, then they would be red tagged, so, and fines are eventually administered against the person. In this case, I believe it was flagged because the owner wanted to get the loan through the bank, and the bank wanted to make sure that the zoning was okay on the property. That's when the owner said, I want to make sure the zoning is okay on the property. So that sometimes the banks are also a way for us to find out.
I was just trying to understand the function and how information is transferred from one place to the next to the enforcement. That was it. I'm glad it came up. I have a house on Lake Street that just keeps adding, and it seems like that they're allowed to just add after multiple phone calls to code enforcement, to whomever we talk to get this stopped, and it has not stopped. So I just wanted to get an answer to that question, so I'll be in contact with you about it.
Yeah, and if you guys ever see construction and you're wondering were proper permits pulled, always feel free to send our office or the building department an email or a call, and we can look into it.
Thank you.
I'm not a
Councilmember
member of the
McMahon.
committee, but I am in favor of it in my district, so I would ask that you support the
And
passage.
the last thing I would like to add is working with the organizations that are trying to provide affordable housing. I know that the multifamily dwellings tend to be much more affordable for those looking for housing. And not to dismiss the concerns, I think they're very valid, but I am also in favor of allowing this to continue as a multi-family dwelling. Okay, any last comments? What is the pleasure of the committee?
Point of order.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if you had public hearing.
Oh, public, yes. So I'd like to open this to the public, pardon me? May I borrow? Thank you. She kindly is allowing me moments. So I'd like to take this to the public. Is there anyone in the public wishing to speak in favor of Bill, lost track of the number, 129-21?
Jason Piatek, 2201 Riverside. I think to answer a couple of your councilman's questions, I believe the position of permits and accountability that just got passed is one of their key responsibilities is to ensure that people, in those situations, try to prevent those type of situations from happening in the future, where people are, adding on, and not one permit is being pulled. Before, there was never any accountability, and I think with some of the Councilwoman Nizgowski and others, you guys passed that position, so hopefully, I think the intent is to prevent that from happening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
He's referring to the license auditor, Chair.
Correct. Do you see anyone else in the public wishing to speak in favor?
I don't see anyone else from the public wishing to speak in favor of Bill 12921.
Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
I don't see anyone from the public wishing to speak in opposition of Bill 12921.
Thank you, Clerk Jones. What is the desire of the committee?
Chair, I'll move to make a motion to send Bill 129-21 to the Committee of the Whole with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could you please take the roll call?
Yes. Committee Vice Chair Nitzkowski,
Aye.
Committee Member Davis,
Now, whose district is this in? Because I may just automatically just like vote against it just because it's Sharon. No. Aye. I support it.
Committee Member Lee,
Aye.
Committee Chair Hammond,
Aye.
4 ayes.
Thank you. So Bill 129-21 will go to the Committee of the Whole with a favorable recommendation. And with that, I adjourn zoning and annexation.
Thank you. I will now call the Public Works and Property Vacation Committee to order. It is now 5:20, we'll say 5:30, and we are here to hear Bill number 130-21.
Excuse me.
Clerk Jones, could you please take the roll? Thank you.
Committee Chair Nitzkowski,
Present.
Committee Vice Chair Davis,
Present.
Committee Member Warner. Okay. Committee Member.
Here.
Oh, okay. Committee Member Hammond,
Present.
Citizen Member Carl Luttrell. Citizen Member Jason Piante.
Present.
We have 6 present.
Thank you, Clerk Jones. At this time, we will proceed with Bill number 130-21. Do we have a presenter here from the city? Both of you lovely ladies could come up at the same time. Thank you for being here. If you can just state your name and address for the record.
Yes, thank you, members of the council. I'm Aladine DeRose with offices on the 12th floor of this building, and I drafted Bill 130-21, which will need some immaterial but significant changes, so I wanted to go over those first before the formal presentation that will explain why the bill is being presented and what it intends to do. So as we looked at the bill and as we received comments from others who had looked at it, there was a suggestion that we change the direction in which the table A1, the truck routes, is laid out. And so if you'll turn to that section, and by the way, we will provide you with the written, can you hear me? If you'll turn to the table, which is section, I think, 20-107, you'll see that as originally filed, the roads were listed from east to west, and those east-west streets have been revised to go from west to east. So that change will be made. There are 6 streets that were originally listed as east to west and will be revised from west to east. So the change you'll find will be beginning with Chapin. Actually, the first change will be Bendix, Cleveland is also known as BR 31, excuse me, and we're listing it that way. Chapin will be that change, I'm sorry, Cleveland. Cleveland is the first. Well, probably easier if I just let you know. Kara has sent me a list of them, so I'll just go over what those are. Cleveland from St. Joseph River to Brick will be a revision from west to east, as will Jefferson from Eddy to Wayne, Lathrop from Bendix to Dead End, Nimps from Bendix to Old Cleveland from Nimps to Olive, and Wayne from Jefferson to William. The roads that will be transposed from, which are now south to north, will be revised to be north to south. And those are Chapin from Sample to Charles Martin Sr. from Washington to Lincoln Way West, Dillon from Brick to Adams, Eddy from Sample to South Bend Avenue, Ironwood from Lincoln Way West to US 20, Jacob from Colfax to McKinley, Lafayette from Indiana to LaSalle, Marietta from Frontage to Bronson, Olive from Prairie to Washington, Olive from Old Cleveland to Brick, and Prairie from US 31 to Sample, William from Western to Colfax. So there's no change in the streets, it's just the transposing of them in the columns. They'll be going from east to west and from north to south. So we'll have that, we'll present that to you this evening. The other changes are very modest, and there's a deletion of any reference to section 1.108.1, since that was eliminated in the revised version, but it was still included in certain places within the ordinance. We've deleted, let's see, the word assembly. We had, in section 106B, the word assembly was shown as a new addition, but that word was already in the previous version, so that will not be underlined. These are more changes that the company who will do the recodification will be more interested in, because, as I said, they are really not substantive. They're just clerical in nature. And we added the word blocks from the first, section 6. Sorry. Yeah, it's section, at page, let's see, under C, subsequent deliveries, subpart 1, 3 dots, I guess small Roman numeral number 3, city blocks from the first delivery or pickup, so the word from had just been omitted there. And another cleanup, and the last paragraph of that section, it is further the intent of this subsection. The word "the" was missing. We capitalized the word "section" in other places where it was in lowercase to be consistent throughout. And then one question that we had from the council, for the council, which is, if you'll turn to the very last page, you'll see that there's a section 20-109.5, followed by a section 20-109.7. That's how the original ordinance read. I don't know if you would prefer that we make this penalty section 109.6, since there really isn't anything in between, but maybe the intent was to add something later. I don't know, but right now, it reads exactly as it read before, and I don't know if you'd like to change it. We can do that as we make these cleaning changes this evening. So I am sorry for the last-minute discussion of this, but we didn't get all of the information until just lately, and we had to put it together fairly quickly. But we will have both a highlighted version so you can see what changes were made from the original to the current version, and then we'll have a clean substitute as well. And at this time, the more interesting portion of this, the purpose, intent, and an explanation of the ordinance and why it's needed, will be made by Kara Boyles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody wish to ask any questions from her before she leaves the podium?
I'm just curious where the information which was delayed came from.
I'll give a little more information on that. So you can thank your citizens member, our former city engineer, who gave me a nice QA/QC on Sunday night. So some of these changes, actually, where we're converting the directional streets from north to south and west to east, I mean, it makes sense in terms of how you would look at the direction of a street. And some of those are not, are the original ordinance and just something that we didn't consider changing. So when we went through, my team went through the first revision of this ordinance, well, we've been through multiple. We were actually working on this pre-COVID, so we got a little derailed. But some of those, that was how they were written. They were backward. They were written east to west or south to north. So we cleaned all of that up in this revision that you got in the last few hours, or you're getting.
Thank you.
So Kara Boyle, city engineer, 13th floor of this building. So thanks for having us this evening to talk about this change. Again, like I said, we have been working on this for quite some time. I'll go through a little background on the ordinance, talk about the different sections, the definitions, the restrictions and regulation sections, permitting, go through a little bit of the truck route map where the actual meat is, and then if you have any questions for me, I'll try to give answers. All right, so the original truck route ordinance is circa 1986, and then there was one update to this ordinance in 1988. It made two minor changes. It allowed exceptions for municipal and utility vehicles so that they would not be subject to this ordinance. And it also authorized the marking of routes where trucks are prohibited, so it allowed for us to be able to put up no trucks signs. Since then, we've had some major city improvements. A lot has changed over the last 30-plus years. We've had the conversion of the downtown streets, so we have two-way conversion, smart streets, complete streets initiatives, so our roadways, some of our roadways are more narrow. Installation of different roundabouts throughout the city. Those were not there in 1988. And just overall higher volume of truck traffic from businesses, specifically out on the northwest side of town. Lots of industry happening there. So in the current ordinance, we have one definition of a truck. That's a vehicle with 3 axles or a vehicle over 10,000 pounds. Just a little more explicit words there, but that's the basics. So now we have new definitions introduced, definitions that we have been operating under. Definitions that we basically took from NDOT, so as we followed their already good model. So we have now definitions for hazardous material. So prior to this, there were no regulations for carrying hazardous material via the ordinance, what it means to have an oversized vehicle, what it means to have an overweight vehicle, and what it means to be a superload vehicle. So all 4 of these are newly introduced definitions in the beginning of the ordinance. Under the regulations section, the current ordinance allows that the Board of Public Works may designate roadways, again, like I said, as no trucks via signage by proper resolution. Now, this version, some of the revisions that you see, will provide additional clarification for the board. Board having the authority to designate and approve truck routes by permit and designate the city engineer's office to manage this process. And we do that through 2 specific types of permits, one called a special trucking permit, so that's your overweight, oversized, and your hazardous waste, and your triple trailer permit, which goes actually to the board. What I'm explaining to you is a process that has been established years ago, before I became the city engineer, so that has been the process, but it wasn't actually in the ordinance. So the engineering office was managing permits. The records I have go back to about 2015. In terms of restrictions, we're including some new restrictions. So there is a 9-block rule. So we require, obviously, that trucks stay on designated truck routes, but of course, they have to make deliveries that are off of the truck route, and we give them a 9-block city rule. However, we wanted to put some language in there that would minimize their access to residential streets. So for any residential streets that are actually, have roadway widths less than 28 feet, unless it's the actual street in which they're making the delivery, they are not allowed to utilize those streets. So for our narrow residential streets, they are not allowed to access those. We also put in new restrictions for inclement weather, so which would require that trucks are not allowed to be on the road during inclement weather, and that would fall subsequent to our other ordinances related to inclement weather, so when there are special restrictions put in place throughout the city. Drivers must also be able to provide a written bill of lading, manifest, and a city permit. So if you're pulled over, you must have the copy of the city permit as well. Prior to this, that wasn't explicit in the ordinance. This is a newer section on permits and liability. So again, this cleans up and kind of codifies what is actually happening in terms of permits. So we manage those in the engineering office, oversized, overweight loads. This would also establish permit fees for these types of truck loads. $35 for a single use for oversized weight, hazardous load, $50 for a super load, and if an industry or a company wanted to do an annual permit, then that would be $405. These are fees that we pulled from NDOT, and they're very comparable to what you might consider if it's $35 for a single use or $50, that barely covers the hourly rate of one of my staff to, depends on who's, that's an hour's time, and it's going to take sometimes more than an hour for sure for someone to review. When you get into some of these more complex permits, it could take a few hours. And it also establishes that liability is joint between if there's an owner and a driver. So it's definitely on the owner, but if the driver is not the owner, then it's going to have joint liability for any damages. So before there was no section on liability. This gives you sort of a breakdown. This isn't a big money maker for the city. So you can see we don't issue a lot of permits, but it is something that we receive, from time to time, a good amount of complaints, a good amount of concern over. And so, but you can get an idea for the last 5 years how we've been tracking thus far this year. We've only seen 13 oversized, overweight permits. We've denied one, basically because a denial can happen basically when we come to an impasse with the company in terms of finding the best route, and if they're not willing to utilize that best route, or if they can't produce all the documents that are needed to justify that they've met all of the other requirements. So there are various reasons why that might happen. But we do work to try to help and assist as much as possible, but then there are just some times when it's not, certain roads aren't going to be allowed to be used. I'll go through our quadrants real quick so you get an idea of what's happening here. Here's the northwest quadrant. You see the addition of roadways, Dillon Drive, Olive Road, Nims Parkway. So all of these serve as existing truck routes now, and now they will be shown in our truck route map as truck routes. Also near the airport, Vorty Drive, and Lathrop Street. So those are some good additions to the map that aren't presently shown in the current map. We also have some more downtown-centered ones. The majority of our downtown streets don't really allow for large vehicles to make turns, so this will help with that. You've got the removal of streets like LaSalle. You have the smart streets and roadway conversions downtown, Dr. MLK, Michigan Street, Jefferson from MLK to Main, Washington Street. You got some tight bends and turns on these roadways where we tend to see some more significant potential for property damage around these areas. And then we have the Transpo Center, so Lafayette Boulevard, south of Sample Street. So some of these just making some good changes. So Lafayette, I'll zoom in on that. maybe that's not showing, so Lafayette and Main Street, you see here the removal of Michigan Street after the Chippewa roundabout was constructed. So we want those vehicles to take Main Street, those trucks to take Main Street and stay off of Michigan. Similarly, here in the southwest quadrant, you've got some removals. Again, you have the removal of Washington Street over by MLK to Olive, and the addition of Washington Street from Orange to Olive, and then we're having that connection there from Bendix, the addition of Meade Street from Bendix to Orange Street. So mostly that removal, that section there of Washington Street, and a little cleanup there so that our trucks can make that maneuver around Meade back up to Olive. So taking Washington Street basically out of play. So in summary, you've got some updates to 1986, 1988 ordinance. Basically, our roadways now reflect our current infrastructure. We did some clarification on the roles and responsibilities for permitting, established permitting fees, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to this that you might have.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Committee members, do you have any questions? Councilman Davis?
Thank you. Yeah, I have like a lot of questions. I've been talking about traffic patterns in and around this city probably for, I know definitely since we got back here on council, but before then. And I really believe math-wise, commerce drives, or traffic drives commerce, right? And I've always believed that the areas that do not receive a level of traffic, that means trucks, cars, et cetera, to that particular area, that area itself dries up and wilters away. Thank you for the report. I think it proves more to me of what I have been saying, and I really hope my colleagues really pay attention to what I am saying about traffic. Right now, we have a scenario on Lincoln Way West that I don't know anyone here asks for. You have a street that has gone from major traffic flow to horse and buggy at this point. Turning off of Olive, going on to Lincoln Way West is very difficult. I mean, obviously because of the construction, but I can only imagine when this street is actually packed or when it's full, how the access to Lincoln Way will be from Olive. And so going further with this discussion, I really believe that there needs to be, I guess, more of a refined approach given what the city wants to be. It begs a larger question in how the city sees itself visually on the map. Because if we are noticing Bendix and that access that used to be there historically has been restricted given the new construction, where are we sending all of our trucks to and how are we sending them there? President White, God bless her soul, I wish she was here because she always talked about the donut, the hole in the donut, meaning everything is going around a certain location within the city, and that area itself is becoming more and more of this inner city. She talked about that intently, and this is what I'm seeing again, and I'm saying it again out loud. To adopt such a plan without even looking at the economic benefits, I think the Department of Traffic, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, is even talking about how racism was impacted, or the highways impacted the racist conversation, and we're talking about dollars. I see that on a micro level here in the city. I'm not saying anyone's wrong, I'm not saying that, but I think there is a culture in which how we choose who receives that traffic count, and I'm talking about that commerce, versus the other. I digress with the discussion because I can go on for like the next 30 minutes with this, but I really believe in order to take this into full account, in a way that it projects 5 to 10 years from now would be better for us. So there has to be a mayoral conversation. The mayor has to talk about what the city looks like. If we adopt these type of practices and these things, we're going to start seeing more and more things go out different ways in our neighborhoods, the urban core, in which we want better neighborhoods. We want better access in our neighborhoods. We want those things, and we want our neighborhoods to be vibrant and thrive. But if we're not bringing anything in, it can't not do that. It cannot function like that. And I really believe that those conversations has to happen before we adopt such a plan like this, because this goes at the very crux of how a city grows, or how a piece of the city can grow or die. It's traffic. Traffic is commerce. It's like blood flow to the heart. I digress.
Is there any other Councilwoman Hammond?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Boyles. The question I have is, a couple council meetings ago, we were talking about the storage facility that AT&T was building out Orange Road, Adams Road area. And there were questions about the actual strength of the road itself and how it would be able to withstand the trucks. And I'm just wondering if there are any similar concerns with the routing that has been selected here. Will strength testing need to be done on these roads to make sure that, the different array of trucks that are being rerouted through some of these areas?
We won't have to do any in this case. So most of these roads, some of the roads that are added, for instance, take NIMS, for example, or Old Cleveland, those are concrete pavement roads, right? So all the roads that were being designated at this time, cleaned up and designated, they are adequate for truck traffic. So.
One more question. Thank you. Secondly, somewhat in the same vein as Councilman Davis, I constantly hear from constituents their concern about Main Street in Michigan and the traffic there. And how much additional traffic do you anticipate on Main Street if you are eliminating Michigan as a traffic route?
Well, in the way that I've what's happening is that, trucks are taking Main Street now because they cannot navigate the roundabouts. Or maybe they do use it, they navigate the roundabout once, and then they realize they should not take Michigan. So really nothing is going to dramatically change. This is cleaning up, and I can appreciate the bigger picture conversation. What we're really doing here is cleaning up a 30-plus-year-old chart and map that needs updated. That was the first and the main priority. But when you start getting into ordinance revisions, you start peeling back and you start finding all of the small, minor things like Aladdin came forward with, just the missing words, and then it starts to create a life of its own.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other committee members? Jason Piontek?
Thank you, Dr. Boyles. I had a question, kind of along the same lines as Councilwoman Hammond brought up with when they did the AAP subsection. A lot of the people that brought before the Plan Commission and the council were complaining about vehicles that were just, they said it was a blatant disregard of the trucks because they could, cut off. I proposed something, and I guess just if you could, take a look at it. I guess, has it ever been considered about identification of vehicles? Obviously, when trucks go through, the cabs or the trailers itself, don't necessarily provide identification of who could possibly be, driving the vehicle, because trailers and other things are rented. But some municipalities put ordinances or have ordinances for anyone pulling a permit to identify their vehicles. Obviously, they should have Department of Transportation numbers, but if there are issues where trucks just do blatantly disregard, traffic signals or signs. I mean, obviously, you're going to have some where they get lost or something like that, understood, but I guess if, for those that, when they do pull permits, and has a safety issue, just to ensure that there's accountability and adherence to the permits, that, the vehicles be identified.
I guess I'm not following if there's a permit pulled and we would have, I mean, all the information is identifiable, if it's tracked, but in terms
But there's
of-
nothing on the vehicle itself, correct? So a truck
No,
could
you're right,
pull
they
a
would-
permit and be unidentified.
In terms of the permit, the paper document that we would give them?
The vehicle itself, if you're driving down the road, obviously you wouldn't be able to see the permit or any of the paperwork that the truck
No.
driver would have.
Mhm.
But if a vehicle is driving, down the street or, especially when you have constituents that know if this ordinance passes and you have these changes, they know that their street is no longer accessible to trucks and day in, day out, they'll see a certain truck drive by, but it's not marked. So how do you say, hey, the unmarked truck is going by? If there's identifying markers, then perhaps that could help curb that.
That's possible, but again, it's true, this is relevant to oversize, overweight, super load, and hazardous. So, like, not every truck would have, that's, again, we only issue, like, I showed like a dozen permits. So that's not for your typical, just any truck, right? So it has to be oversized, overweight, super load. So it's actually specific to that.
But I guess also along those lines, from a safety aspect, anybody that would be
So you're
asking
saying like a registration process for all trucks? So
for
that-
the registration, anybody wanting to pull a permit with the city would have to have some type of identifying marker on the vehicle that they're driving.
But you could still be a triple axle truck, and so long as you don't meet those requirements of oversized or overweight, you can still be on the road, and you're not, it's just lawfully allowed. There'd be no permit with the city.
Okay, but the ones that do ask for a permit
Sure.
under the ordinance, is there, I mean, any, trying to get just some type of enforcement or accountability?
I would just think, my only comment to that is that of the 9 or so that we did this year, it wouldn't impact, because those are one time. And so if we have annuals, I think that number is very limited too. It's not on here. But the annuals are pretty limited, so anyone that would pull an annual permit, we maybe get 1 or 2 of those a year. So
But over the last 5 years, you'd had 132 permits approved? So that could potentially be 132 different vehicles coming through South Bend
Those
that
are-
would have to be,
that's a one-time use. So these oversized, overweight are one-time use unless they're an annual, and then it's only annual. So in 2017, we did 18 permits, period, and then 10 superload. Am I missing the point?
One thing you might add is that these superloads probably do follow, for the most part, a designated truck route.
They're required, and they are required to do an NDOT permit as well.
So
Yeah.
superloads, the heavy loads that are gonna do the damage to the street are not, the public's not gonna be seeing them very often. 132 times over 5 years is not very much. Whereas the AEP trucks are gonna be going up and down Adams Road all the time.
Not permitted by us. They don't.
but AEP trucks are,
They're permitted off the truck.
and there's identifying markers on the vehicle itself.
Not all their contractors.
We have a,
That's my, and that's, I guess, to my
Okay,
point.
yeah, we are limited to 2 questions in committee. Did you have another question, Mr. Piontek?
No, that's all.
No. Mr. Latrell, did you have a question? No? Okay, going to the other. Councilman Wax.
This may be a question for Aladeen, but I'm not sure, so I'll let you both decide how you want to answer it. For the liability, was the intention to create strict liability for truck drivers or the owners for any damage?
I think the intent was to include the drivers as well as the owners for regular damage, and that would be that damage for negligence.
Excuse me, can you say that on the mic so we can get that on the recording? Thank you.
Yes, let me go to that section. The intent, the intent was to preserve tort law as it is, which is negligence, but extend it to the driver as well as the owner, because oftentimes the driver is not liable, because since there's an owner that would be liable, this would make both liable.
I have a different understanding of operator negligence. Just because you're an employee doesn't mean that you're not responsible. The question is,
We wanted to make that clear in the ordinance, so.
could I ask that a second look be done to make sure that if that's what you're trying to accomplish, to say that specifically? Because the way I read it now, it could be read to provide strict liability for operators or owners of vehicles for any damage that occur while they're driving their vehicle. And I wouldn't support such a statute. So I don't, if that's not your intention, great, but I would ask that.
No, our intention was not to create a strict liability, it was to include the current law of tort liability, which is negligence and
Okay.
not strict liability.
I'm just concerned with the current language, as I don't see that expressly.
And
Point of order, if I can, parliamentarian, due to the nature of the time,
Yep.
could you two, please, Councilman Wax and Attorney DeRose and also Mr. Palmer, get together and get the language sorted out for the 7 o'clock meeting? We still have the agenda to go over and
Sure.
then to move forward.
I'll reserve the remainder of my questions.
Okay, thank you then. Is there any other questions from council members?
I had a question too.
Please.
Dr. Boyles, just to clarify, I did count 11 new additional routes to the existing truck routes, but that's, as you explained, more cleaning up, trying to centralize some routes. Is that the case?
It's actually pretty even in
Okay.
terms of lane miles, just for the record. I
Okay.
don't recall the actual numbers. I want to say we deleted 170 and we added 220 or something like that lane miles. So it's
Okay.
very comparable.
Okay, and then just another question about impact. Councilmember Hammond brought up the impact on Main Street, but just overall, do you expect greater traffic and impact on the routes that we, with this new proposed routes, than we are typically seeing?
Also, may I interject at this time, what I'm leading to is that can
She wants
council
us to move the
please
meeting
submit
along.
questions to Kara for the 7 o'clock portion. We have to come back to the 7 o'clock portion of the meeting. So I'm asking council to either for Mr. Wax's purpose to make a substitute. It seems like it's appropriate that it's going to come before council for a vote. All other questions that may be, can be answered to be brought back was the reason why I interrupted, so we can move forward with the agenda as a full council and end the discussions, because we're way over time.
And I would still like to have public input.
Absolutely, we still have to have that.
Can I respond real quick on that?
Yes, please
I'll
respond.
just say that one of the things, I don't necessarily anticipate, additional truck traffic or by any means, but what this will allow us to do is communicate effectively what the actual truck routes are in the city. So once we have a new map revised, we'll be able to communicate that to the different vendors who actually supply truck route maps to truck route drivers, right? So, there are different industries, Garmin, Rand McNally, they update these maps, and we will be able to supply, this information out, so actual truck route maps will convey correct information. And even though what we know is that a lot of these routes The reason why I don't expect it to be significantly different is because truck routes are typically followed by word of mouth in the industry, and so they know where to be and where not to be most of the time. But this will clean it up, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public at this time wishing to speak in favor of Bill 130-21?
There is no one from the public expressing interest to speak in favor of Bill 130-21.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak in opposition?
There is no one from the public wishing to speak in opposition to Bill 130-21.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll move it back to the committee. If there's no other questions, could I get a recommendation?
I move that we send this bill to the committee of the whole with a favorable recommendation.
I'll second. So it's been moved and seconded.
Okay. Committee Vice Chair Davis,
No.
Committee Member Warner,
Aye.
Committee Member Hammond,
Aye.
Committee Chair Niskowski,
Aye.
Citizen Member Carla Trell, Citizen Member Jason Piantek.
Nay.
Okay, we have 4 ayes.
Thank you. Bill number 130-21 will be sent to the Committee of the Whole with a favorable recommendation, and to which there can still be the substitute bill that will be coming to us. So those other changes that needed to be made, please reach out to Kara Boyles or Adeline with those changes. At this time, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Council, we have on the agenda. First, we have the invocation by Pastor Norm Andrews of Grace Point Church, and the report for the subcommittee on minutes from the October 25th and November 8th meetings. We will need motions to accept. Special business, we have Michael Fencing with the American Academy for Parks and Recreation that will be presenting the award to Director Aaron Perry and VPA. We also have a special business commemorating the history of Thanksgiving, announcing the annual WBS Thanksgiving Sweet Potato Pie Contest, sponsored by Councilman Davis. And we have the Committee of the Whole, Bill 129-21, and also Bill 130-21. Then we have bills on third reading, being the same. The resolutions we have will be 21-52 by Councilman Niskoski, sponsoring of the driver cards. Resolution 2153 was tabled by sponsor Councilman Davis until the December 13th meeting regarding the South Bend Fire Department classification. Bills on first reading, 131-21. Motion will need to be made to ZNA. Public hearing and third reading on December the 13th. Bill 132-21, ZNA and public hearing and third reading on January 10th, 2022. Bill 133-21, first reading, ZNA, public hearing and third reading for January 10th, 2022. Bill 134, first reading, ZNA, public hearing and third reading on January 10th. You said January 10th? January 10th, 2022. And Bill 135, to Personnel and Finance, public hearing and third reading on December 13th. Bill 136, Personnel and Finance, third reading, December 13th. Bill 137, Personnel Finance, December 13th. Bill 138, Personnel Finance, December 13th. Bill 139, Personnel Finance, December 13th. Unfinished business tonight, we have the appeal from Westminster and the Historic Preservation Commission. I will turn that portion over to Parliamentarian Palmer to outline our duties and the criteria for that. Both sides get 20 minutes. We get a total together as council 15 minutes, and then rebuttals from each 5 minutes total. So, but he will lay it out step by step for us, the process. And then unfinished business, if you have any unfinished business. The new business is in your packet, the 2021 last meeting, that council date is December the 13th. The new packet is available in the clerk's office and also in your packet for the 2022 meeting dates, for you to put in your calendars. Then privilege of the floor, and then the adjournment. I don't know if anyone has any questions, and sorry, Eli, I know you guys will work out a substitute bill for the wording, so I didn't want to just cut everybody off, but we definitely was going over time, and we're gonna have a long night, if people need to go out and let pets out or eat and then things of that nature. Anybody have any questions? Thank you so much. All right, there's food that we ordered from the clerk's office, so thank you so much, clerk's office.